Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Today we have the story of Georgia. Georgia grew up in what Jehovah's Witnesses often refer to as a, quote, divided household. Her mother was a faithful Jehovah's Witness, and her father was violently opposed. In this episode, you're going to see how that opposition actually played into the hands of the witnesses. You'll also see how someone from an abusive situation ended up in another abusive situation after being raped. Georgia faces PTSD after a life of abuse, secret Bible study drills, and the doctrine of an imminent fiery destruction of the world. But she does so with a sense of humor and going for her dreams in life. Before we jump into her story, I just want to encourage you to stick around after the interview, and I have some audio from a listener from a new feature on my website to share. So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet Georgia.
My name is Georgia. I'm 39 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness and I am shunned.
All right, Georgia, so how did you come into the religion in the first place? How did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, funny story about that is my parents, before they met, my mother was going to be a nun. She was very religiously committed. She met my father. She threw that away. And when I was 2 years old, her sister introduced her to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Her sister was going through a tough time in her life, and they found her the way they do. Mm-hmm. And so she encouraged my mother to get into it. So I do recall having one birthday party at 2 years old, but that was my last one till I threw my own when I was 25.
That's a long time in between, but yes. We all understand that. I do personally as well. So then, you said that your parents kind of came in through that way. How what was it that drew her, do you think?
Well, I mean, this was also back in the 70s, 80s. You had a lot more women at home. My mother was a homemaker, and my father worked. Now, keep in mind, my parents had a tumultuous religious start from the beginning. My mother was Catholic, my father was Protestant, and he converted to Catholicism to marry her. Then she dropped out, became a Jehovah's Witness, and he was left in the lurch. He always hated the witnesses. He always called them a cult. And so I actually grew up in one of those divided households. So I had a mother who was super, super religious, super in, and a dad who was, I'll say, violently opposed.
Oh, wow. All right. So let's see. So then what did it mean to you back then? I mean, you obviously your mom's all in, your dad's not in at all. You're kind of caught in the middle. What was your circumstances? What did it mean to you?
Well, I would say in any divided household, no matter what the situation is, a child is going to pick one parent over the other, especially if one of the parents doesn't deal with situations well. My father had and still to this day has anger issues. And so my mind went to protecting my mother, and she must be right. She's the victim, because we're always taught about how, if we're doing things for the faith, we're going to be victimized, we're going to be beaten and stuff like that. So it all lined up in my child mind that this must be the right religion. We're being oppressed in our home. And so it essentially made me into the perfect little soldier. I was 100% in, JW girl. I believed everything they told me, everything they said. I would sing the kingdom melodies all the time. I'd pray all the time. We had book study at our house. I mean, that was down the line after my parents' divorce, but it was, I was 100% in. I was the girl who had preached to the classmates, and believe me, it didn't make me popular. And we moved from England to America in 1990. I was 10 years old, and American school children are very different from English school children. I tell you that. English school children, I think, are a bit more forgiving. But I'm a new kid in school. I've got this weird accent. My parents made me wear headgear to school, so I'm already just incredibly weird. And I've got all this Bible stuff trying to push in their faces.
Oh, no. You just had a big target on your back.
Let's put it this way. I had to have lunch with the teacher. Otherwise, I would have got my butt kicked on the playground every day. I was that kid in school.
Oh, man.
I was just and I know that now. If I had some sort of normalcy, I think I could have done better. I mean, I grew up from 10 years old till I was about 17 before I was able to make any real connection with another person. And that's because, I mean, you're in this bubble, you're thinking everybody around you is going to die Armageddon. I remember very clearly, seventh grade, I was 11 years old. I was sitting on a bench crying my eyes out because I was just so lonely. I didn't have any friends in school. I didn't have any friends in the congregation. And my brother and sister, they were tight with each other. Parents didn't understand me. So I'm just bawling my eyes out in the quad at school. And this group of girls comes up and they see me crying. And one puts an arm around me and they're trying to tell me, don't cry. Why are you crying? I said, I don't have any friends. And these girls are so sweet. And I know still a lot of them to this day. They're still friends on Facebook. They said, we'll be your friends. And I just cried harder because as a JW child, I knew that they could never be my friends. None of these people could be my friends. I was going to have to make friends in the congregation, children that I just didn't relate to. And it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so, depression started very early.
That is, heartbreaking is the correct word for that. That is horrible. I'm sorry you ever had to feel like that. I think many of us have at various times, and it's just so sad when here this little group of girls comes up and they want to be your friend, and yet you can't have them as your friends because of the rules of a cult. So let me ask you. So you said your dad was he had his anger issues, and you kind of referred to him being violently opposed. So I mean, is that to be literally taken? Was he truly violent with your mom then? I mean, that's what it sounds like. But
oh yes, I mean, he obviously didn't learn any anger management, had issues growing up, and that's not me making an excuse for it. I'm still not happy with it, and I've had to go through years of therapy to deal with it.
Sure.
But for it to be specifically aimed at the religion, it was the fact he couldn't control us. Because you got to think, now I've got me, my younger brother, and younger sister. We're all JWs. I remember telling him, Dad, I'm not going to celebrate Christmas anymore, or birthdays, and him just losing his mind. And when my mom would go to the conventions and assemblies, he'd be so angry. If she wasn't there to be, I was the next target. I could have just the wrong look on my face and I'd get pummeled to the floor. So it would just be really, really difficult. And I don't say these things for people's sympathies. I honestly say them so that they know that if I could survive this stuff and still get out, they definitely could. Yeah. And I mean, these things, I wouldn't hope them on any other person, but I'd say to anybody else going through this, it is possible to get out. And unfortunately, the violence with my father got to such a point that when I was 15, and this is a time when he tried to fight back, he starts taking us to a Baptist church out here in California. He wants us to switch up religions because we're too into this cult. We're preaching and knocking on doors. It's driving him crazy. And he starts taking us to a Baptist church. And, oh, golly gosh. I went on a tangent there. I lost my train of thought. Oh, the violence. He starts taking us to his church, and I actually knew one of the women in his church. She was a family friend, one of his friends, and I tried to tell her about the violence that was going on in the home, and she told him, which made it worse. And so there's a lot of conflict. So when I was 15, I finally, he was away on a business trip. He came back. He found out that my mother had taken us to the convention, even though he'd instructed her not to. And things got crazy in the house. And that was the first time I raised my hand to him. I actually picked up a poker by the fireplace and was trying to defend my mom. And that was the last time there was violence. And then my parents got divorced 2 years after that.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that brings up a lot of things. So,
oh, yeah.
First of all, I kind of wondered if the violence was just aimed at your mom or if it extended to you kids. It sounded like at least you, because, and then you look at how that reinforces so much of what you're being taught at the meetings and conventions.
You better believe it.
Yeah,
I thought I was a martyr for Jehovah because I'm getting beaten at home. I'm getting ostracized at school. This must be right because I'm suffering.
Yeah, here he is thinking that he's doing something that's going to discourage you. And really what he's doing is exactly reinforcing what you're being taught. How counter that is to what he was originally trying to do, feeling so out of control.
Mhm.
I mean, regardless, he obviously has problems and bad ways of dealing with all of that. I'm sorry that you
Mhm.
all had to go through that. But also, you've got this going on at home. I think it's also fascinating that you defended yourself one time, and that was the end of the violence.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, because this isn't the first time I've heard a story, that involves something like this. Or I remember my dad. He was emotionally abusive, but I remember he and one of my brothers had a little bit different relationship, because my brother kind of, for lack of a better term, didn't give a shit, and
No,
would talk
that's
back
what I
to
went
him.
through as well.
Yeah, yeah. So my brother didn't give a shit. He talked back to him, and my dad would back down. But I, trying to be the good one, would
Mhm.
kind of bow to what my dad wanted or whatever, and that never went well for me. So it's funny, when you punch a bully in the nose, oftentimes they run away. Um, I'm
But
not.
it also, to me, explains how you can have different kids or different people growing up in the same house and all have different experiences. Like
Oh
my
yeah,
sister was never, she was never touched, she was never beaten, nothing was ever happened to her. So she has a different perspective on life as I do. My brother, he was always in, but he never really took it super seriously. So he would go to all the congregations. I mean, he was even in the Spanish congregation, but I learned that was so he could meet Colombian girls. But but I mean, he was kind of one of those half in, half out, but we never knew. And both my siblings are out now. They haven't been disfellowshipped yet because they won't go back to hall. But we're all out. But I think they're still, what do they call them, physically out, mentally in a
right.
little bit.
Oh, that's the worst.
It's a transitionary period because they still have a chance to go either way. I mean, I was physically out, mentally in for almost 11 years.
Yeah.
So, and I was disfellowship when I was 24, and I didn't wake up till I was about 35. So, I mean, still having those thoughts and emotions and fears every day. And I was just telling my husband, it's such mind control, because if you are a true JW, you're thinking about this 24/7. And anytime you enjoy your life, quote unquote, is you're taking a break from thinking about it. If you're being honest, being a JW is constantly worrying about Armageddon because you're afraid to die. If you're being completely honest with yourself.
Oh
And
yeah.
understanding and embracing the thought of mortality is so overwhelming. I mean, if you look at religion around the world, I mean, people are completely controlled by fear. It's an easy way to control people. But if you're JW, you're thinking about Armageddon all the time, and there's little snippets of time where you're enjoying life and having fun, you feel guilty. Or I did. Because, if peace and happiness, and then the end will come. You can't enjoy the system of things because this is the devil's will. It makes a person almost unable to enjoy life. And this is why when I hit about 12, 13, I started feeling suicidal. I'm like, what is the point? I can't live up to these standards. I'll never be this perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going out on service. I'm doing auxiliary pioneering. I'm going to school. I'm doing everything I can, but I feel like I'm never going to be what they want me to be. I remember when I was 16, there was a girl in our hall who was studying with a young lady, and I got invited on the study. Now, the girl in our hall, she had just lost her cousin to a car accident. She was grieving. So her talking to the study, she was also talking about her cousin and trying to cope. Now, the young lady she was studying with comes to me and she says, Georgia, I feel bad about T. I won't say her name. I feel bad about her cousin and that she's grieving.
Mm-hmm.
But all this JW stuff, I'm just not feeling it. Like, it's not for me. Like, I still want to be her friend, but I'm not into this religion. It's just not for me. You know what my wise 16-year-old self said to her? Honey, if it's not for you, it might not be for you. You got to go with your heart. Because I'm thinking,
Wow.
I'm telling her that Jehovah's going to speak to her heart and she's going to feel it. But I said, if it's not for you, it might not be for you right now. And I think I'm being diplomatic and being caring. So, of course, she goes back to the other girl, T, in our hall, and tells her, well, Georgia said.
Oh no.
So by the weekend, I'm at the hall and my mom's telling me, now everyone's saying you're a bad association because you're telling people not to study.
Oh no. No. And you have to think too, you were being so honest and telling her really a very loving thing, not to force yourself to be something you're not.
Yeah.
All the while you're forcing yourself into a mold, to the point of
Yeah.
being suicidal. That's you did say suicidal, right? When you were like
Oh,
12.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I spent some time in hospital for it.
Yeah.
I really was. I felt completely and utterly hopeless.
Yeah, I felt that way. I was 31 when I finally got to that point where it was like, I don't know, I can never live up to this. What's it matter? Why stick around? There's nothing good here, and I can never be good enough. So what's it matter? It's not really a wanting to die, but just what's the purpose of continuing to live? I can't. I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it through Armageddon. I'm not going to ever be good enough. So, I already know my eventuality.
I'm sorry. I
Oh,
apologize.
that's okay. No, go ahead.
Maybe because and the thing about having that constant unsureness is, that's brainwashing. You're constantly unsure. You're constantly wondering. You're constantly fearful. And I really feel that the level of quality that Jehovah's Witnesses, the governing body, has assigned to life. Mm-hmm. If you go by just the Bible alone, I think a lot of people could still manage to live their lives. But that's not life as a JW. You're not just going by the Bible. You're going by the judgment of everybody in your congregation, everybody at the assemblies, everybody. And it's that person-to-person judgment that weighs on you so heavily. That has nothing to do with anything scriptural. These are all just people's own thoughts and opinions. But you can feel that there's no chance of being good because of all these other people's opinions of you. If you look at it, people hate it. There's some people who hated Mother Teresa. There's going to be people on this earth who hate you no matter what you do. Sure. But because you are kept inside this bubble and your only association is these people who are constantly judging you and you're judging each other, you have no chance to feel good about yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, there can't, because even if you have something that you think is good, there's going to be somebody out there who thinks it's awful, and they're going to let you know, and then you're going to have to hate yourself for it and try to change. I remember, I think I talked about it in my own story, but I can't remember. But I had a friend who he had a BMW car. It was a used BMW that he had. He was out in the rural territory in Kentucky, and he got so much crap for having a BMW. So he gave his BMW to his dad. Somehow that was okay for his dad to have it. He went out and bought a Honda Odyssey minivan that he said cost more than that used BMW.
But that's going to shuttle people around.
Right. And in his defense, the BMW was even a four-door, but of course the van would hold more people. But it was just the perception that people had that he was too uppity if he had this BMW, but it was okay for him to spend even more money on a Honda Odyssey minivan to haul people around and service in. And so then later we were at a get together and he was wearing, or maybe I was wearing, a shirt that had a logo on it, Nike or something, I can't remember. And he said something to me about it, and I was like, well, no, who cares? It's just the brand logo. And I just remember him saying, well, like, you can never make everybody happy. About the only way I could make everybody happy was to kill myself. Because, it's whether you're wearing a logo of a brand name or you're driving a car with a certain brand name, like, there's always somebody who's going to judge you adversely for it. And about the only way to be okay is to be dead. And in that moment, he pretty much admitted that, because there's no way to live in Jehovah's Witnesses and be okay with everybody being yourself, because somebody is always judging you. And it's just such a harsh and sad place to be, because you can never truly be happy. You're always restricted by the rules of the cult or the judgment of others. And it's just such a miserable way to live.
And these are the same opinions I've heard expressed by friends who are former Mormons and former Scientologists. So it's a method that works.
Yes.
if for anything else, if they found something that works, so they're going to use it.
Yes, if they can get you to doubt yourself enough, then you have to go to them to find out what is right. And so then they get all the power.
Exactly. And, when I was in high school, one of the biggest eye-openers for me was when I read 1984.
Oh,
and
oh, that book is amazing.
It rocked my world. We had a school assignment. We had 2 weeks to read it. And I remember I took it home, I got my homework done, got my Watchtower study done, and I sat down and I read this book and I couldn't put it down. I read it all the way through that night. I went to bed late. And I remember just lying there staring up at the ceiling, teenage girl, just like, what the hell? And just the thing where they're snitching on each other and the thought. And it was just like the comparisons to the life I was living, it was just, it
Yes.
rocked me to my core. Just that new perspective of seeing things from the outside and thinking that there's a possibility of thinking about things from a different perspective. That was, I tell you, I prayed, I cried, I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
Because things were starting to unravel. And the more things started to unravel about the JWs in my life, the more I was concerned about my own spirituality. So I'm chastising myself and telling myself I'm wrong, even though things are making themselves more obvious every day. And it's just, there was an internal struggle. So there was one part of me, I think, that was just so conflicted all the time, because it was like, hey, some of this stuff can't be real. I mean, look at the world, you're learning things. And the other part of me is like, no, you got to hang out. It's like that, what's his name? Gollum, Smeagol. It felt like that eternally. Yeah. I really did. Honestly, that's the closest thing I could describe to it. And you're already a teenager. You're already going through everything you go through in those years. Plus you got this on top of it.
Yeah.
And so I would say that, lucky for me, I love to read. And so I would read and read and read. I read everything I could get my hands on. And so that helped me to cope with the world, because I didn't have any interaction with people outside. I didn't even learn how to really deal with people till my 20s.
Oh, sure.
And so, it's just, and that actually happened because after high school, I wanted to go to community college. I had actually rejected, I had a full scholarship to Howard University that I turned down because I'm a good JW and I was going to pioneer.
Of course.
And my father, we do talk now every now and then, he likes to remind me that you turned down a full scholarship.
Oh, I turned down scholarships too. I totally understand.
Right? I was a good student. I was a good girl. I did everything by the book as much as possible.
Yep.
And after high school, I wanted to say, let me go to community college, because then I can at least still pioneer. I can work, And Mom didn't want me to do it, but I said, I'm going anyway. She said she's not going to support me. I said, I'm going anyway. I need to get something. I need to learn something. I need to just get out of this house. And I had a job at the bookstore up at Ohlone College here in Fremont. And that's where I met my best friend. And we've been best friends since 1997. And he was raised Catholic, and he was a very empathetic fella. He didn't understand anything, and things I would tell him about my life, he would just kind of stand there aghast. And and he did come to a few meetings. He's come to a few of my meetings back then, and my mom was always eyeballing him, but we've always been platonic friends, like brother and sister.
Right.
And through that friendship, I've met so many people, and so many worlds are opened up to me. And I think the only bad thing I started doing in college was started smoking. Mm. And I think, I'm going to school and working, I'm trying to do all stuff. I was smoking, I was hanging out at a coffee shop, I would play chess, but that would be like the worst thing I would do. And this is from like 17 to 19. And then I was 19, I dated a worldly boy, my first one. And he was a boy in college, and I think he wouldn't mind me saying his name. His name was Alexander. And I just thought he was just the coolest thing ever. He adored me. I adored him. And I remember the first time I thought in oh my gosh, if that guy asked me out, I have to say yes, because he looks like Trent Reznor. And you gotta remember, this is the late 90s, 90s now. And so, and he was just, and he was Wiccan. I don't know if he still is, but he was Wiccan. So that was a whole new thing. So I'm going through this thing where I'm a JW girl. I'm dating this boy. I'm trying to tell him about the faith. Of course, I'm hoping he's going to convert, because that will just make all my dreams come true and I won't have to go amongst these boring JW boys.
Yeah.
Because by then they were boring to me. I'm going to school. I'm
we
meeting
were
people.
boring. I get it.
Yeah,
I totally get it.
I honestly say, as a JW child, I was a jerk. We were self-righteous.
Yes.
We were, and I don't mind saying it. I was polite to people. I always was. But there's always that thing of like, if you don't act right, you're going to die Armageddon. Like, I've got this heavy hand over you. And it's just when you, and I would say things to people in school and stuff like that, which, didn't help my social situation.
Oh, no.
So when I got to college, and it was just like, okay, I'm already weird. Where's the other weird people? And I found people who were forgiving of me, and they always thought that was kind of strange, but I just never talked about the religion to them. I learned to function in that if I never talked about my faith or whatever, people liked me. And I met some wonderful, wonderful people who probably 20 years later now, they're like, oh, we always thought you were an atheist or whatever. You just never talked about religion. We discussed things. You never say anything. I was like, because I was hiding a lot. And the reason why I was hiding so much is I didn't want to put the organization in a bad light, because I had so much to say, and a lot of it was not positive.
Right.
And the reason I kept silent for so many years was that fear of not wanting to put the organization in a bad light. And that is ridiculous, but you know how much that is hammered into you.
Oh, yeah. And don't bring reproach upon Jehovah's name, which
reproach.
Yeah, ultimately is the organization. That's what they care about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when did you? I was just going to ask, when did you get baptized? When did you actually take the step to fully become one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, that's everything in my life has been an event. I was 15. I remember we were in assembly, and this was the point where my parents were just full on fight. Things were bad, and I was learning that my mother's style of love was, if you do, I say, I love you. I was starting to learn that. So I was being manipulated by both parents, but I was on mom's side. So when I turned to her, I said, Mom, I'm ready to get baptized. She was so happy. She was so nice to me. I was a princess. It was the greatest time of my life because she was truly, truly happy. Now, growing up a life of conflict and all that, not to say, monetarily, we were fine. That's why a lot of people didn't realize the problems that we had in the house. We grew up.
It's funny how that masks it. As long as you look the part, like people think that you're happy and that everything is okay. But money doesn't, there are lots of people who have plenty of money, but their houses are full of unhappiness and hate.
Oh, I grew up in $1 million homes in Fremont in the 90s. And we had a neighbor he'd drag his wife out on the street and beat her.
Yeah.
And this is in some of the wealthiest homes out here. It doesn't matter. And so we have cousins to this day who are like, we never knew those things were going on in your house. We always thought you guys are wealthy. You're always flying all over the place. You dress well. You always had money. And it was hard because I'm like, so if we were destitute, you would have paid attention. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, that honestly says a lot about our culture today. There's people look at people who are poor and look down on them and are more accepting of them having problems. But if you're wealthy and you have problems, well, that can't be, or, people are just people. It doesn't, regardless of how much money you have or where you live or what color your skin is or whatever, how old you are, people are just people and we all have problems. But for you, getting baptized was almost, did you see that kind of maybe as a solution to your problems? Because, suddenly your mom was so proud of you and so excited for you.
She was so proud. It was a huge stand against my dad, and I, because we grew up in a religiously separated household and everyone in the congregation knew it, my baptism got to be the subject of a special talk at the Cow Palace.
Yeah.
So we got to be, brought up on stage like chattel, we're martyrs for the Christ, I mean, obviously my thoughts on it are different now compared to how they were back then. But my mom, she's giving her talk about how she grew up with an opposed spouse and her oldest child is getting baptized today. And I was down in the seats and people are hugging on me and everything. Oh, congratulations, so happy for you. And, when I got baptized, all this applause because, they knew who I was. It was, you feel like a rock star.
Yeah.
And one of my, I felt amazing. I felt so happy that I had done this. But I know now it was more for my mother's happiness, because I knew this is what she really wanted, and I was going to do whatever would make her happy. And I always had. I honestly was that child. This might sound a bit mad to you, but 8 years old, I wake up in the morning, I make her toast, her tea, I bring it up to her in bed. I pack my brother and sister's lunch for school. I mean, I was a good kid.
Wow.
Sure
you were a people
Bible
pleaser.
Well, we even had drills. I mean, I've got PTSD because we'd have these drills. We'd have our secret Bible studies because father was opposed. So when he'd get home, we'd hear the garage open. So that was our signal. If we were studying, we'd study just outside my bedroom door because my bedroom was over the garage. And so we could hear the door. So everybody had their spots to go to split to when he came in the house. So he wouldn't know we were studying the Bible.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. That is some serious mental manipulation of a child. And this went on for years. And we're underground. We're oppressed, As soon as daddy comes home, and it's going to make him the enemy no matter what, because we're all fearful now. Yeah. So we knew as soon as we hear the garage, I'm in my room reading a book on my bed. My brother's in his room playing on Nintendo. My sister's downstairs playing with her toys, something, we all had our assignments where we had to go. And this was, every day this was drummed into us. And this is why even now, I admit PTSD, loud noises, certain things, they have a bit of an effect. I got to calm myself because I'm jumpy. I'm not going to lie. I'm a bit jumpy. And
well, yeah. I mean, you got to live out the, so much of being a witness is hearing things about, concentration camps and, how the end's going to come and we're all going to be persecuted and we're all going to have to go underground and hide in the woods and all this stuff. And now everybody has go bags so they can go hide in the woods when the government comes after them.
Which is amazing because isn't Jehovah supposed to be taking care of them? What's these go bags for? Isn't that kind of going against what we've been told that you're going to be taken care of? And I mean, I'm just saying.
Oh, no. Jehovah's hand's kind of short. You find the more you listen to what they say. It's absolutely hypocritical. Jehovah's supposed to provide, but you're supposed to have all these emergency supplies and everything. But it's interesting that you kind of got to live that a little bit because of your dad and your mom and their relationship and I don't know, that's a really,
it's nuts.
Yeah,
it's nuts is what it is.
It's an intense place. That's an intense place for a kid. You kind of got to laugh so you don't cry, I think, sometimes, because that's too much, for a kid to deal with, which is why you have PTSD now.
It's a lot. Yeah. And I say conflict builds character. So I'm busting with it, just.
You're a character now, right?
I definitely am. There are definitely people who would say so. Once you learn not to be afraid, you kind of just get out there a bit.
Oh, sure. So, all right. So you get baptized. Were you the kid? Because, I mean, it sounds like if you had the circumstances and as people pleasy as you were, which, are you the oldest?
Yes.
Yeah. That tends to be the case with the oldest. I'm the oldest, and my wife is the oldest as well, so I totally understand. So, were you the type then, kind of the overachiever? Once you were baptized, did you, kind of like really double down and like try to auxiliary pioneer or give all the talks or be on assemblies and things like that? Was that kind of your goal that led you toward that, pioneer goal later?
I did everything. I did the cleaning the restrooms at the assembly. I was in it, auxiliary pioneering. It wasn't until I was 21 when a lot of that stopped. But I will say from the time I got baptized till I was 21, every single job that I had, I made sure that I could get to my meeting. So I was offered jobs in companies. I was even offered a paid internship for Cisco Systems back in 2001, which I didn't take, but luckily it was right before the dot-com crash and everything fell apart, so I was lucky I didn't take it. But I was offered all kinds of jobs that I would turn down. So I'd always end up in retail because those would be the positions that would allow for me to make my meetings,
Right.
book study, preaching schedule. And my mom was so proud because no matter what job I was working, I was always able to pay my rent on time to her. And I was able to be studying, make my meetings, and there was never a conflict. And, I'd get into it with managers who would say, no, we need you to be here. I'm like, no, I got my convention. Either let me be there or I don't need this job. I was that person. Absolutely. It's a really tough place for me to be, because while I am so happy to not be there anymore, I sometimes get upset about the time wasted.
Oh, yeah.
And it
I understand.
amplifies me to do things, but then I get upset again. But that's the thing. I'm still young, I still have a chance to do some things with my life. But there was so much time just put into this nonsense that I will never get back.
Yeah.
And so if I could encourage anybody at that age now to get out now, I will, because you're throwing your life away for lack of it, for just because you're afraid.
Yeah.
And everybody's afraid.
So I don't know about you, but with myself, I was actually recently talking with another former witness, and we were just kind of talking about the, I don't know, silly mind games we play with ourselves to some extent. But like, I want to live to be, 80 years old, almost just so that I can live more years outside the cult than I lived inside the cult. like I can die at 80 years old, a happy man, as long as I have lived more years in freedom.
I'm hoping by the time I'm 80, people have stopped fighting each other and figured out immortality so we can get some stuff done. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, now that would be pretty nice. That would be pretty
if we
nice.
stop fighting each other in these nations and stuff, we could actually be making some advancements here. I'm just saying.
We do waste. Well, you know what? Honestly, that's a really good point, because humans just in general waste a lot of time. We fight with each other instead of working toward things that would benefit humanity. It's just, that is one thing. I remember somebody telling me once, they were talking about their regrets and how much time they had wasted. And it just really struck me in the moment that, just because we wasted time in a cult doesn't mean that if we were free all those years, we wouldn't have wasted our time, because there are lots of people. It's just a human thing to do. We all end up spending time on less than fruitful or productive things, especially when we're young. It's just part of the human growth process, and it's something we all do. So just because we wasted it in a cult doesn't mean we would have necessarily wasted it otherwise.
When I was young, I was very ambitious. I had always wanted to be a singer. I've always been very, into creative things. And I used to play piano, and it was always you couldn't excel at anything. You could be good at something, right, but don't excel. Because then I had teachers wanting me to perform at recitals and do all these things and concert, and can't do that. I remember saying I lip synced at a Christmas concert, because I really used to love those old Christmas songs, and I just really wanted to sing. And my mom was there, and she was so mad. I'm like, no, I was lip syncing. The teacher said I had to, or I'd fail. That was a complete lie. Yeah. But it was just, I wanted to sing so badly. And so I know for me, especially in those college years, I had friends saying, you should do something with your music. And I'm like, I can't. I got meetings. But I wouldn't tell them that. I was like, I knew I had other obligations. So now I will say that now I'm doing it. Now I'm doing the music thing. And I don't know, we do waste time, but I definitely had a lot of ambition. When I would see the holidays come up, even though I wasn't celebrating Christmas and Halloween with the other children, I always had ideas on how they could improve things or things to do. But I had to sit there silently. So I've got all these millions of ideas just stocking up now. So as an adult, I throw huge parties. I do kids' parties. I make their birthdays gigantic, because I've still got all these ideas that I can use. And I've thrown some great parties for people. It's wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. To be able to express yourself in that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is true that we did lose a lot of opportunities.
Yes.
There's a lot of talent that is wasted in the cult because those people never get to fully express it. And even if we do get to express it now in our lives, and ultimately we should just be grateful that we can, um, that's I guess the ideal way of looking at it. It still does sting because we're behind.
We are. We are.
Developmentally we are behind everyone else because we've been kept behind for so long.
I definitely agree with that. I've got friends who they kind of tease me because I've admitted to them. I said, even at about 21, 22, I had the knowledge of a 12-year-old as far as dealing with other people. I had the trust, I had the naivete. I was like a 12-year-old kid because I didn't really think people were going to hurt me. I didn't think they were going to victimize me because I'd been raised in this bubble. I mean, quote unquote worldly people,
right?
Yada, yada, yada. But I think I was also out to prove that I was going to meet good people. I mean, I got in a situation when I was 21. I was working for a fella who taught chess out here, and I was really, really big into chess at the time, which is really funny because my mom, she would be concerned I would be out, like, what are you out doing all these nights? She'd accuse me of out like messing with boys and, doing all kinds of stuff that I'd just be like, what? And I was playing chess at a coffee shop. But anyway.
Well, now, hey, chess is a war game. And so you probably really shouldn't be playing chess, right?
Well, it's just that I wasn't home, so she couldn't see what I was doing.
Right.
But there was a fella who took me out for my 21st birthday, and he did try to, for lack of better words, assault me. And I had seen him as like a father figure. I never expected it.
Right.
And so little things that happen like that, I was able to get away. But little things that like, they kind of push me back into, oh gosh, the witnesses must be right. Everybody out here is evil. And they're trying to, so there's little things that have happened.
And and like you said, you were naive. You didn't realize
completely
that people would be like that.
Completely. And again, I did have a worldly boyfriend from age of 19 to 21. I ended up breaking up with him for the witnesses. And this is in college age. Hormones are high, but he was a virgin as well. And we both decided that we were going to wait till we're married, which is, I mean, imagine now. I can't imagine now. 2 years, 19 to 21. Neither of us sleeping together. Okay.
Right.
And our friends, we talk about it now. They're like, we thought you guys were just going out. Like, nope, we never had sex. We were committed to this thing. And after 2 years, I ended up breaking up with him because my conscience is bothering me too much about the witnesses and everything. I broke his poor heart, and my mom sent me back to London for a few months because basically, once I felt like I couldn't be with him, I wanted to die. I mean, I was a teenager full of emotions and everything's falling apart. I wanted to die. And he actually met my mother in the emergency room. I know I'm skipping over a few things. But she ended up sending me off to England. And
so wait,
I was there.
Were you in the emergency room because you had an attempt?
I was about to attempt, but he picked up on it over a phone call and sent the police to my house.
Gotcha.
And so they, ambulance took me to hospital. And of course, my mom gets called in and she meets him there in the emergency room. Oh, he's got long black hair. She's just like freaking out.
Oh, wow.
But
she just to make it even worse. I mean...
But I mean, I was still I was still going to all my meetings. I was still being a good girl. Me and this boy had never had sex. We never crossed any of the lines. And it just felt wrong that we would be robbed of being in love just because we were different beliefs. I mean, I knew that my parents were, but he always told me that he would never be angry about it. He said, you can practice your religion. I'm never going to oppose it. You can do what you want. Just let me do what I want. And I was okay with that. Like, it seemed practical to me. But, at the same time, I know what I've been taught. So it broke it down completely. And I ended up breaking his heart.
Yeah. And I mean, that is heartbreaking because it's just, it's a normal thing. People fall in love, and you two had built this relationship over the course of years, and to have to give it away just, I don't know, just because of this one belief, or which is really just how it will appear, that's what it is more than anything. Um, I don't know. I can understand how you got to that point. So
Oh, it
you're
was extreme. I mean, I was working on campus. His mother worked on campus. I quit my job. I was working IT on campus at the time, and I was working in the computer lab. I quit that job. I quit school. Everything. I left. It was too much, and my mom was happy that I quit school. So she was okay. Let's send you to England. Maybe she'll go back home and get herself together and stay there. But Alex eventually convinced me to come back, and I did come back, and we were back together for I think a couple months after I returned, and then we broke it off finally because I couldn't do it. Just the stress of the two different lives was too much.
So let me ask you, when you were in the hospital for a time, did anybody, I mean, I don't know how long you were in there, but did anybody come see you? Did the elders, uh, did anybody support you?
There's never been any support. I mean, I remember when I was a teenager there were a couple elders that felt I was close to.
Mm-hmm.
One is Larry Lamerden. He's actually on the video of one of the people defending Jonathan Kendrick in the Candace Conti case. Larry Lamerden.
Yeah, we're going to have to get to that.
I've got a lot more on that, trust me. And he was always very kind to me, always very sweet, and he always seemed like he cared. And so I would tell him about my depression. I would tell him about my problems a bit. And he actually seemed like a person who did generally care. I would say out of anybody. But I mean, that's just from my interaction with him. As far as Larry, he knew that I was like taking antidepressant medication, and he would tell me, there's other people in the congregation who are taking things for depression. They're dealing with things. And I think he was probably the only elder who really I spoke to. A couple of the others, because I wasn't really socially interactive with a lot of the children in the hall. Michael Clark, he's another one on the video defending Kendrick, and I have no favor for him whatsoever. But I remember when I asked to get baptized, my mother told me that he was surprised because he didn't see it in me. She told me flat out that this elder,
Wow.
he didn't see it in me. And so, I'm conflicted as to why he would say that and all this stuff. But I think it's, I look back and I remember my mother always telling me to smile. The kingdom will never smile. And I think back, I'm like, how can one smile when you're so miserable in the inside? I mean, one of the first things they tell you when you get to an assembly or a meeting is, oh, aren't we all happy to be here together, brother? They're trying to tell you what emotion you're supposed to feel.
Yep.
Now, that's not the emotion I'm feeling. My emotions read very clearly on my face. I'm terrible at poker. And so if I'm at the hall, even though I'm hearing this information and I feel like this is the right information, I'm constantly troubled, and it's all over my face, especially when they talk about women in their positions and certain things. I mean, it's all over my face. I have always felt that having women as being, second-class citizen was wrong. And this is growing up in a household where it was run like the 1950s. I mean, if the food wasn't hot on the table when Dad walked in, it got thrown across the room. I mean, I was raised in that specific type of environment, completely patriarchal, and you've got the religious stuff. But internally, I fought it from day one.
Sure.
I was just like, I am just as worthy. I'm just as good as any man.
Right.
How are they supposed to be superior to me? I don't believe I'm better than any man, but I don't believe any man's better than me.
Well,
so how does this work?
Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that. So what was it, from the time you're a little girl, you hear these messages, and your upward mobility in the organization is very limited. You can...
Oh, gosh. Quick builds.
Right.
I always wanted to be on the quick builds, but I got to serve lunch, and my brother, who couldn't hold a hammer, was on the roof.
Yes. Actually, we were just talking about that this week. My wife got to be in the insulation crew, but that was pretty much because she grew up in the congregation with the brothers who did it, and they needed somebody who was small to get into the attics, and she was very small back then and could fit into the the tiny corners and stuff as a kid. and nobody wanted to do insulation. It's itchy and kind of awful.
Right.
So she could do that, but she said that she would go around to other crews when the installation wasn't being done and try to get on those crews, and she could never get in. They wouldn't let her do anything else. So, you know, when you see that the best you can be is what, a pioneer, maybe married to an elder. You could be the chief toilet scrubber at the Kingdom Hall because the brothers never cleaned the bathrooms. You know, like there's so little that you can do. What did that do to you as a kid growing up seeing that? How did you feel knowing that you were so limited? Did it make you resent the brothers? How'd you feel about that?
Absolutely. I would say growing up, like I said, in a patriarchal household, and then being told basically, I mean, every time you go to the meeting, if you break stuff down, and I would say maybe not always biblically, but definitely with the JWs, everything that happens bad is a woman's fault.
Oh,
you know, even Babylon the Great, the chick. Yeah. So it's just
he was the one who got at him. So.
Right. Right. It's a constant influx. It feels like you're getting beaten up. And I felt, even though I was raised in this way, and I will tell you, even my mom said, why can't you just accept that this is how life is? You know, the men are in charge. And I'm just like, I just can't. I have always just felt from my gut that it was wrong. I have always felt that equality is how the species is supposed to survive. And sure. I don't know what triggered that, but I have always felt that since I was a tiny little thing growing up. I've always felt that. And so even though, you know, when I did finally marry a JW boy, and that story's coming up in a bit, I was trying to be the happy homemaker, soothing homemaker, you know, do things the way my mom did, you know. I was trying to fit into that role that I had been told was where a woman was supposed to be, but at the same time fighting it internally because I'm like, I can do anything a guy can do to a degree. A guy can do anything I can do to a degree. Why are we saying one is better than the other? It doesn't make any damn sense.
Right. Especially when it's not...
you can't support it.
Yeah, you can't support it, and the women are really... I don't know. It's that whole submissive role thing, which of course that can be abused in different ways. I mean, the obvious way is that the man abuses it and says, you know, you're supposed to submit to me. But I mean, I grew up in a household where I watched my mom use the submissive role as a way to not do things. Like,
wow,
you know,
I never even thought about things from that perspective.
Yeah, she had ideas and she had things she wanted to do or she thought about, but I think on some level maybe she didn't really want to do them, and so she would always be like, well, like she would use it as an excuse not to do things, and it was really frustrating watching as a kid because I was like, why don't you just do this, Mom? Like, you want to do this thing, let's just do it. Dad probably won't even care, and she's like, well, I have to tell him first, and he's not gonna be happy about it. And I'm like, he's not even gonna care.
She played you.
Like, you're using this as an excuse not to do the thing. Mm-hmm. You know, and like if that's what you want to do, okay, whatever. But don't blame him because you're not doing it, because you could do it. You're choosing not to, and blaming the submissive role on him. And he honestly probably wouldn't have even cared. He just didn't want to be bothered with things. He was the kind, right. You know, he was like, you know, if you asked him about something, he would tell you no constantly. That was his default response. But if you didn't ask him and you just went ahead and did whatever it was you wanted to do, he didn't care. He just didn't want to be bothered. So
he didn't want to be bothered.
Yeah, that's all it was. He just didn't want to be bothered. But she would always go, like, you know, as soon as he got home from work, she'd run right up to him and ask him a thing, like right when he came into the door, and overwhelm him, so he'd just say no. And well, now we can't do this thing, Mom, because you did that.
Everybody knows you don't do that. You don't do that to anybody.
Well, yeah, you would think, right? But I think, you know, sometimes we self-sabotage, and it's just a thing that humans do, and we hold ourselves down just as much as we're held down at times, and so it's just funny how these dynamics can be used in different ways to hold people down, and sometimes we end up holding ourselves down with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
let's get to, so you say that, so, you know, you're in your early 20s, you go off to London, you come back, you date Alex again for a little bit, that breaks off. Now, eventually this gets to a point of marriage to a witness. Can you kind of describe how this all goes down over time?
Absolutely. So I moved back to America, and my mother is she's doubling down on the JW stuff. She's getting really weird. And my brother has his own car now. And speaking of BMWs, my dad bought my brother a Beamer for his first car, a two-seater. And so at the congregation, my mom's always saying, his father bought it for him. His father bought, she's like making
because not only is it an evil BMW, it's also a two-door car.
It's
and
a
that's
two-door.
Not a good service car.
That's not a Pioneer Mobile.
That's right. That's right. You have to have at least 4 doors so you can take other people around in service.
Exactly. So I digress. So my brother, he was going to the meetings with my sister, and I was having to ride with my mom. I didn't drive. I still don't drive really to this day. That's just another little quip about me. But so I would have to ride to the meetings with my mom. So I'm working at this time. I'm 21 years old. I'm working 3 jobs. I pay $750 a month to live at home with a midnight curfew. Okay. All right. Just stay with me.
No, I know this story. Go ahead. I've done that. Not at that rate, but I've done that.
Oh, I got in 2 minutes late once because of a traffic accident, and I was out with another girl. She's disfellowship now too, but my mom always thought she was bad association, and she was calling her mom, saying she was a bad witness, and because we were stuck in traffic, and she just cussed her. It was just a horrible, horrible situation. But so 19 to 21, 21 hit. My mom got really crazy. I'd really gotten into sewing, and I made this top with like the Black Widow symbol. I was really getting into comic books and stuff at the time. I love Black Widow. And so I was showing her, she got like super mad about it. She's like, you're not being a good witness. And like, she just blew up, and I had it. I just had it. So that weekend when she was at her meeting, I called a girl that I had met from school. We packed up all my stuff in her truck, and I had found someone in a penny saver and moved out. It was, and I know this sounds extreme to just pick up and move, but
not
if
to me.
I could, okay, I was like, if I could explain the mental torment
sure.
that I was going through and just the feeling of hopelessness. I mean, to really get into it, I would probably start feeling it again. So that's why I'm kind of talking about it kind of in a joking way, because it was a torturous time in my life, and I would never wish it on anybody. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I felt useless. I felt horrible. And so I had friends in school, trying to help me out. One of them brought me my first guitar and amplifier so I could do something, because they always knew I loved music. And so finally my friends, they just packed me up and moved me out. And I had a great roommate. This roommate I actually ended up living with for 5 years. She became my boss. I started working for a paper company in Fremont. I mean, these were some really amazing times in my life. And she would laugh at me because I would go to the Kingdom Hall. And I was in Newark, California. And I didn't drive, so I'd ride my bicycle, and I'd ride my bicycle to the hall because I didn't really know anybody in that congregation. And, they were looking at me because I'm a single girl who's living with a worldly woman, moving into a congregation, And so I always got a lot of people, kind of eyeballing me. But there was one elderly sister
that's silly, because they should be excited at the fact that here you are, somebody who is living with this worldly person, but you're riding a bike to the meeting. So like,
right?
Isn't it ridiculous how they give you the side eye when they really should be hugging you and taking you in and loving on you for the effort you're putting forth?
People are going to judge everything you do. I mean, I remember I think I was probably maybe 17 or something, and I wore fishnet stockings with my dress at the Kingdom Hall. My mom was giving me so much flack. Oh. Can't believe you're wearing these stockings. And I tell you, next week, half the girls had on fishnets. So
bad association. Look what you're doing to these other girls.
I always had my own style of fashion. I didn't know I was a goth girl till I learned what goth was in college, but I found out that I was goth. My mother was always mad I was wearing black because I just liked it, and I would carry around this copy of Edgar Allan Poe's stories. And then I had friends in college. Oh, you're a goth. I'm like, what's goth? I don't know what that is. What do you listen to? Blah 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 blah. Look how you dressed. Yeah, you're a goth. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know I had a subgenre, but oh gosh, sorry,
So
I
there
jumped
was.
off the topic.
Oh no, that's okay. So there was an older sister at the Kingdom Hall that.
Oh yes, yes. There's an older sister, and I've always been the type, growing up in the halls. We're always friends with elderly people and hanging out, and so I started doing that with her. She lived close enough to where I had moved, and I'd help her with her groceries, go out and hang out with her, and that was good for me. It was I was working. At the time, I was managing a GNC in Newark, and 21 years old. They gave me my own shop.
Nice.
And had to split and everything. Yeah, it was a great experience. And so I'm making really good money. I mean, we're talking 2001. I'm making after commission about $20 an hour. My rent is $650 a month. I've got a great roommate. We're going to concerts and stuff together. And I'm going to my meetings. Life is good. And so I meet this woman, and she tells me her grandson is coming to town, coming to stay, and she'd really like me to meet him. So eventually he comes, we meet, we end up started dating. He seemed like he was okay. He's trying to get his life together. He tells me that, he's really working on the truth, and he had some drugs and issues in his past, but he's gotten really past them. And he's staying with his uncle, who's not a witness. Now I find out that the uncle and the aunt do drugs. There's needles all over the house. He's panicking because he knows he's got a drug past. So we petitioned the elders to try to find him a place to move because it's not safe for him there. I'm thinking, naive JW, people are going to be open arms. Come stay with us, brother. You need this help because I'm an idiot. And, and of course, nobody wants to do it.
Right.
It gets worse. It gets worse. We're calling child protective services because they also have a son in the house. There's heroin. There's all kinds of stuff. And finally say, okay, fine. Just get your stuff. You can sleep on my couch. You got to get you out of that house. Because I'm a naive fool. Obviously, he eventually worms his way into my bed by saying, you cannot touch me. We're dating. The elders know that you're staying on my couch now. We've had to let them know. Things, we got to stay by the rules here. And I'm thinking he's going to play by the rules because, again, I've had a boyfriend for 2 years who was not a witness, who was able to.
Right.
Okay, so just keep in mind my mind is. So one night we go out to a club in the city. I have too much to drink. I honestly don't remember how we got back or anything, but I know that I was unconscious. And I know when I woke up what was happening. Mm. And it was the 4th of July because I woke up and the first thing I heard was fireworks and pain. And I realized what was happening. And in that moment, it was, this is somebody that I thought I was falling in love with, that I trusted, and they've ruined everything.
Yeah.
My whole life is ruined. It's destroyed. And I remember screaming at him. I pulled my pants up and I ran out of the house, barefoot down the street like a mad woman because I don't know how to really describe it. I felt like everything was over.
Yeah.
He had done this and my life was going to be ruined. And I remember screaming that he wasn't worthy. How dare he do this to me? How dare he do that? And I remember on the street him collapsing on his knees and crying. I can't believe it's happening again. Those words will haunt me for the rest of my life. Yeah. Because then I understood that he'd put another young lady in this position, which he admitted to me later there was another girl, but he didn't go into details. And this was the thing. It's like, okay, now keep in mind, he wasn't a stranger. He wasn't somebody I met. This was my boyfriend. Okay? Yeah. We're in this situation. He's claiming that he was weak, that he was messed up. I end up cradling him and comforting him while he's crying about what he's just done to me. And then we sit down to try to figure out how we're going to deal with this. You know how ridiculous that is to me now?
Yeah. It should all be on him, but you're ending up taking it on. I mean, obviously, you took it on because this was done to you, and so obviously you're going to have your own feelings about it. But as far as repercussions within the congregation, this should all be on him, you know.
So he says, well, if we get married, then we can, we might be able to fix this.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, if we get married, we might be able to fix this. So we're gonna work on this. We're gonna get married. So in the time between, he did propose to me. Proposed to me at the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco because I love that spot. He did propose. Went through the whole thing, and he made sure that any wavering that I had or felt, he made sure to stay in control. Like, well, maybe this isn't a good idea. So I was just like, well, I got to make sure this man marries me. So it was doing whatever he said. It was putting myself in degrading situations. And I say that now as a nearly 40-year-old woman who's not a prude, but I was introduced to things and his lifestyle that I didn't know anything about. Like, he was into a lot of sexual kinks that, again, I was like a kid. I didn't even know these things existed, and he wanted me to do them. And this is, again, before we got married. But if I didn't do them, he was going to run out, and I was already going to be spoiled.
Wow.
So,
yeah, he was much farther down that path than you were, and wow, that's so much pressure, and it's so awful. I'm sorry that you went through that. That's I mean, it's a horrible thing to have happen to you, and then it just gets further complicated by the congregational repercussions that could happen from that, from the pressure that you feel yourself when you're indoctrinated to believe that now, you're sullied or dirty. What is the Mormons have the thing where they talk about the piece of chewed gum? I don't know if the witnesses do that or not. But
they've got like the key and the lock, and there's all kinds of, you're just a used woman, dirty. I mean, it basically, and I was.
But it's always the woman. It's always the woman who's the chewed gum, not the guy.
Woman, And what's really, I mean, the trying to make sense of all of it. I'm trying to make it right. I was trying to make right out of an impossibly wrong situation.
Yeah, can you speak to that Dinah part again?
Dinah, she got raped, so it's all her fault, because she was hanging out with people that she shouldn't have been. It's not the people who should have controlled themselves or the people who should have been responsible for their own behavior.
Yep. She
was in the wrong place, and therefore she's in the wrong. And that whole thing was, I felt like I'm not going to have a leg to stand on.
Right.
I allowed myself to be alone with him. We were drinking alcohol. I thought I could trust him. We'd been dating for several months. I think it was almost a year by that time. And I did not, I mean, to say I didn't expect it is kind of, it's, but I digress. I mean, we had I had elders coming up to me. I don't know if they ever said anything to him, making sure, checking on us. And we know he's staying on your couch. And I'm like, he wouldn't need to be. If, someone would open their home. I know we got a lot of young brothers in his houses. He just moved into a house. I know he's got extra rooms. Like, could somebody? And so then this happened. We ended up getting married. And it was an interesting wedding. Old big JW wedding. We had it up at a bed and breakfast up on the Mission in Fremont. Beautiful. It was beautiful. But definitely once the marriage started, it was more clear who I had married. The emotional abuse started early, and I wasn't handling things well either. I was going to therapy. I was on medication, bad medication, which kind of made me like just a zombie, basically. So I just go to meetings, I cook his dinner. And he still had this thing about sleeping with me when I was unconscious. So he would encourage me to drink and get drunk, and I would wake up with him in me. And I'm like, I don't. Yikes. I mean, why? You could ask me. You could, it was, and that happened through our marriage. And even with me, whatever you want, I'm here. I wasn't turning him down. I wasn't rejecting him. I wasn't doing any of those things because I was trying to be a good wife. And even despite everything that happened, I was trying to make this work. And
But
then,
isn't it interesting how you, just the way you just phrased that,
yeah,
you weren't
a
turning
lot of
him
women say
down.
that.
You weren't turning him down or whatever. You were trying to be a good wife. A good wife can still say no, you know?
Well, I say good, but you can't see me doing the quotes. I should have said
Oh. Gotcha.
I was trying to be what in my mind, or whatever
Right.
I'd been told
Right.
was a good
As
wife.
witnesses, yes, that is kind of the way it's portrayed. Absolutely.
And I know a lot of people, because I've watched. I mean, I've listened to my own YouTube interview, and I've seen other people's comments. And there's some people who want to jump in and say, "Oh, well, people want to turn down for sex and da 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 da." That wasn't my situation.
Yeah.
That wasn't my situation. Not that it justifies anything, but it's certainly what I did, whatever he told me to do. And again, I didn't know anything about anything. So whatever he told me, I just did it.
Yeah.
And so, this went on. We got married, and it's troubling me so much that I want to talk to the elders. I want to tell them about what's happened. And he's just like, well, they're going to disfellowship us and da 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 da. You're going to, and at the time, I'd already found out that he was sleeping with prostitutes, so as well as me. So
Well, of
I'm
course.
of course.
He's just a bucket of joy, isn't he?
Yeah, I find proof on the phone, on the computer, and it's just like, then I got to take myself down to the hospital to get an embarrassing checkup because
Yeah.
and I've never been with anybody else, and so I said, look, I really want to talk to the elders. I think it's the right thing to do. Is my conscience bother me? So I go to the elders and I want to tell them what's happened. So I go in that room with the men. And so they're asking me, was there any, sexual activities that took place before Max and I were married? And I said, yes, but you need to understand that it was not my choice how this all happened. And so, of course, their next question is, well, did you enjoy it? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? And you got to keep in mind, at this time, by now, I'm a 24-year-old, and I would still say girl, because I don't understand what they're asking me. Mm-hmm. I was in a situation that, and then they said, well, did he do something without your permission? Is that what you're saying? And I said, I feel like I need somebody else in here to be able to explain this. I want to just tell them everything, but the words can't come out. Again, I'm a young girl in a room with 4 men trying to express that I've been raped, and they're asking me about pleasures that I had. And I'm trying to explain to them, look, before I slept with him and did all these other things, this is what brought us to this moment. And they're like, well, that's a strong accusation. You're saying that he slept with you and you were unconscious, you were drunk. And they said, okay, we're going to bring him in and see if he can make some. And I was like, no, I don't want you to bring him in, because he's going to deny it. And then we're going to go home and he's going to take it out on me. That's all I could think of. So they said, okay, what you can do is write a letter, write down everything that you're thinking. We're going to step out and we want you to write down as much as you can. I don't really remember what was in the letter. I know I was trying to be tactful because I was so worried about saying anything that would offend the brothers. Mm-hmm. Because I honestly felt like I should have been protected. I was trying to find a home for him. I needed help. I felt like every time I reached out that nobody had tried to help me. And I felt like I was in the situation despite trying to do what was right. And so they did the letter. They came back and just disfellowshipped me on the spot.
Really?
Yeah.
They just... Wow. Okay. So then do they follow up with him?
Yes.
Okay.
And he was also disfellowshipped.
Okay. So, excuse me, when you leave that meeting, how do you feel?
I tried to step into the road in front of the car. This Kingdom Hall's right on Thornton Avenue. It's a bit of a busy road. It used to be a bank. I was actually there for the quick build for that. And I remember I walked out in a haze, and I saw a truck coming, and I I went to step in front of it, and he actually pulled me out the road, which is interesting because on the KQED interview, I did say that he pulled me out the road. But I know that it was my friends and everything that pulled me out of the situation. He pulled me out the road. We went home. Obviously, relatives called to say their goodbyes.
Oh.
My mother and my parents got divorced when I was 17. So, she's my parent contact. She's gone. My brother, my sister, the few people I was close to in the whole. One of them, I don't know if I'd ever forgive because he's lived a double life since we were kids, but he openly shuns me and still hangs out with all of our worldly friends.
Oh, of course he does. Of course he does.
And it cuts me. I think he cuts me the most because he's also a fellow that I was interested in back in the day. We were very close. And he gave me such a talking to, and I told him that look, I'm going to get disfellowshipped, and I really want us to stay friends despite anything you've heard. I mean, it wasn't fair. And, he gives me this whole riot act, but then he can hang out and go to birthday parties and Halloween parties. But if I'm coming, he's not going to come. And just the hypocrisy drives me mad. But
well, he has to do that to justify himself. So,
oh yeah,
if he can be pious around you, then it justifies. Then when he goes and does these things that he secretly feels some level of shame for, he can feel okay about it because at least he's better than Georgia. So,
I'm like, you do it. I try not to let it get to me, but it's just you do whatever you need to do to function because I sure will.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day.
It's very
unfair. But, so I was married to this man. He was abusive, yada, yada. I ended up having a very unattractive neighbor. And I mentioned that he was unattractive for the severe point that we became friends. And I felt I would never have the fear of having a slip up because I wasn't attracted to the man. But obviously I was lonely. I was sad and naive. And he was eventually able to take advantage of that fact. And so I also was happily able to announce to Steve that I had committed adultery, and so we would need to get divorced. And I've said my ex's name, but whatever, there's court papers. So we ended up getting divorced, which was a process because he filed the divorce papers first, and he'd had me quit my job. And I remember I was working for GNC. I was making good money. When I met him, he was unemployed. He had 2 trash bags of clothes to his name. That's all he had. When he met me, I got him a good job. He was working for a company fixing car dents. And he was making decent money, but I was making more. The fact I never held over him, but it troubled him. So he had me quit my job because he wanted to be sole provider while we're living with my roommate, mind you. All right.
Okay.
She's allowed him to move in. And so he has me quit my job at GNC, which I agree to do. So when we get divorced, he tries to have me sign papers saying I don't want any alimony. I'm just going to, be on the street.
Oh, of course he does.
So, of course, me, I read everything like I always have. I see that he's doing that. So I've got to counter sue. I've got to take him to court because I just want to be able to pay my rent until I get another job. And then I want no contact with him ever again. Now, I just want to mention also with him, we got married. His parents knew that he raped me. His parents knew that he took my virginity by rape. He called his father the next day and told him. I forced him to do that. That was the last bit of control I had. Now, his father, he was a piece of work. He'd been a witness for years, but he was also an alcoholic. He was unemployed and racist. Put these 3 things together. When my ex told his father what he had done, the first thing his father was said, "Are you sure she was a virgin and not lying about it?"
Yeah. Was he an elder?
I don't know if he ever made elder, but he was in what congregation are they? They're up by Sacramento. They're by Antelope. They're in Antelope.
I was just wondering if he was an elder and trying to protect his position in some way.
No, nobody, none of them. I think his sister and his mom pioneered, but his brothers, I think they're out now, but they were kind of double lifing it anyway. And the dad, he parents didn't end up coming to the wedding, and it wasn't because of the rape, it was because of my skin color, if you can believe it.
Oh, gosh.
I know, right?
Come on. Like you expect, it's funny. I hear these things and sometimes I'm like, well, come on, you're witnesses. Like I should expect better witnesses,
Witnesses, if you look in the watchtowers, remember they used to believe that Black people couldn't understand or relate to their teachings. My mom even told me about this when I was a little girl, but she was telling me it as an explanation of how people's how the light was getting brighter, basically. She would say, oh, witness, there's some people, they used to smoke cigarettes and then they learned through their studies. She said that some of them used to be racist and then they learned. I'm like, well, if they were right from the beginning, what do you mean they had to learn it?
Yeah, it's like, hey,
that was my way of
thinking. You know what, Black people, now you're okay. It's like, we'll allow you now. Like, what an awful, God.
Well, I have conflicts with any Black people who are invested in Christianity on the whole, but that's my own personal feeling because Christianity was not our original faith. I mean, we got Christianity beat into us through the centuries. So if you are Black and you follow that faith, you really got to think about how you adapted to it through the history. But, that's your own personal journey.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, I mean, we all adapt to lots of things through history for sure.
True.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I knew I've only, I guess, since I've been out, realized, like I knew, so one of the things about the witnesses was I think they accepted Black people like earlier than desegregation and things like that, but I thought it was kind of just a way to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like fluff up the numbers.
Well, everything they do is fluffing the numbers.
Yeah. Like that way, look, we're better than, we're different. You can come be with us, but it also makes our organization grow faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they found that going out to impoverished nations, no matter what the color, people want a sense of hope. And so you always see those videos. Remember growing up, going where the need is great and people are so grateful. And you got to remember, these people don't have anything. So anything seems big. Yeah. It's just, you got to look at it from the perspective.
Well, plus we white people get to save you.
Yay.
I mean, there's definitely a savior complex that comes along with all of that. It's
definitely a savior complex. And it used to bother me. I mean, little things. There was a girl when I was in junior high, her mother had passed away at school. And I remember being so sad. I said, Mom, can we get her a card and some flowers? And she said, no, give her this tract about when her loved ones. Oh. And I'm like, that's not going to make her. And I'm just like, I get what we're trying to do. And I want to give her that as well. But can we get her some flowers or just something like a teddy bear or something? But my mom's mind was totally JW. Give her this tract. This is what she needs. This is what's gonna help her. But she didn't realize that was also one of the things that kind of put one of the pegs in for me. Like, if I want to show someone I care, I'm not going to give them a slip of paper about my belief system. I'm going to try to embrace them and try to honestly make them feel better.
Yeah, and it's not just about your belief system. It's about it's about tearing down their belief system and installing your belief system, which is such a cruel thing to try to do to a person when they're in grief.
It's like being a used cars dealer, you're pitching it really felt, and I even felt that growing up, going out, knocking on doors, because even though I felt like I had, quote unquote, the truth, I felt wrong bothering people. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes total sense. I remember one time, I don't know, in my 30s, I just realized somebody had come and knocked on our door and, I don't know, they were selling windows or something like that. And I just remember afterward thinking about how much I hated being interrupted by somebody, for a sales pitch and being like, that's what I've done my whole life. Like, yeah, it's just so, counter to the way that I'm wired. I don't like surprises like that. And I don't think most of the people whose doors we went to did either.
No.
But
No.
so you ended up getting divorced. You've got this racist father-in-law saying these awful things.
Keep in mind, my roommate
Yes.
has no idea about anything that has happened. She doesn't know about the rape. She doesn't know. All she knows is I married this guy. We're living in the house. She doesn't know anything.
Oh, wow.
And I'm keeping this secret from, nobody knew. Nobody knew.
So then how did it go down as far as the divorce? I mean, did that go smoothly or?
Oh God, no. So I ended up countersuing, and he wanted to take me to court. And it was really funny because I had filed the paperwork in, I want to say, August of that year. And I told him, look, I just want to be able to pay my rent until I get a job, and then I want nothing from you. I want no connection to you. Zip, zippo, gone. And that still wasn't good enough for him. And so he ended up getting a lawyer to fight me. Now, remember, I don't have a car, so I'm taking the bus up to the courthouse. I'm doing the paperwork. I'm back and forth. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm cocktailing at a local bar so I can buy groceries. And my roommate is being very kind. She's giving me a bit of a time to get things together. And we end up going to court. And guess who won? He got a lawyer. Now, I want to do a little bit of math here, because in between August to, I got the job in January. So it's August, September, October, November, December, January. That's the 6 months, okay?
Okay.
So $650 times 6 months. Okay, so all I was asking from him was $3,900.
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
He ended up getting a lawyer. And so the lawyer tells me, your ex-husband is paying me. If you have any questions, you can call me, but understand he will get charged. You better believe I was calling that man about the weather. I was calling about How you doing today, John? Just and so after that, not only did he have to pay the lawyer, who he lost his case to, he paid the lawyer $60,000.
Oh my
He
gosh.
still had to pay me my $1,300.
Oh.
I ended up winning in court. And that's why I say there's court files, because he did have to talk, and he did have to admit to raping me and beating me during our marriage and certain things he'd done. So there are case files to back that up. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations has gone so far, I can't take him to jail. I'm concerned about things that happened before me, possibly after, but it's too late for me by government law to do anything to prosecute him. He paid out the wazoo. That's for damn sure.
Yeah,
so I had a lot of friends in college who were very supportive. They knew that he was, violent and stuff. A lot of guy friends, they'd come hang out with me. And, I had a lot of amazing, amazing support in that time. And it was my friends who basically pulled me out of it. All the people that I was told would never exist, all these worldly people that you couldn't trust. And point blank is there's good and bad in every single faction of life that you walk into. You walk into a grocery store, there's going to be good people, bad people, no matter what situation. And so what the JWs tell you is good people, JWs, bad people, everybody else. I had very quickly learned that was not the case in a few short years. And so finding out my college friends, my weirdos and, my little punks and all that stuff, these were the people who were being emotionally supportive, checking on me every day, calling me, coming over. They rebuilt me. And because of that, I was able to not completely fall apart. I will admit I went through a series of years, I think probably 24 to 26, where I didn't care if I lived or died. And I fell in with a bad crowd at that time too. Because, I'm disfellowshipped. My mother's cut me off, all my family. Because remember, my mother's sister's the one who introduced her to the JW. So I've got cousins, I've got aunts, uncles, everybody on my mom's side, more or less, is in the cult. Anybody I knew from a child has cut me off. My father's side, they weren't witnesses, so we were never allowed to get close to them. They're strangers to me mostly.
Right.
And I've just now recently been able to start connecting with them on social media. and, telling these stories and explaining things. And, there's lots of wows and, oh my gosh, and there's more to come. But basically just knowing that I was disfellowshipped and out and just completely alone, and got to remember I'm a reader, I'm thinking this is hell. I think, I can't remember what book it was. They said the absence of God is hell. And I thought that's what I had entered into, and that I deserved it because I wasn't smart. I made bad decisions. I wasn't thinking about what had been done to me. And I'm not thinking that I can really explain it to anybody, because if I do, it's not going to put the society in a good light.
And we've got to protect them at all costs. Yeah.
And that, honestly, I swear to God, is the reason why I kept silent for so many years, because I knew that if I started talking about this, people might start looking at these guys like, hey, maybe some of your rules aren't off the cuff, maybe some of the ways you do things aren't fair to people. But for the fear that people would look at things that way, again, I never even told my roommate, who I lived with for 5 years, and she became my boss when I worked for paper. She never knew. She never knew any of it. And it was happening in her house.
Yeah. So where do you go after 26? After, you said between 24 and 26, you really were in a bad place and didn't care too much. How did you pull yourself out of that?
I had a string of relationships. I was now pretty much out, but still mentally in. So believe me, I was wild, but I felt bad about it all the time. Yeah,
you carried that shame.
It was tough because also I also made a lot of gay friends, and I'd go to Pride in San Francisco, and it was an extreme difficulty for me because of how I used to feel about gay people, and then meeting these people who are awesome and supportive and just trying to be themselves in a society that was saying no. And I was like, I can identify with that on like a different level. But I would go to Pride, and then I'd celebrate, and then I'd be there in the streets partying, and oh God, Armageddon's going to come and the ground's going to open up and we're all going to die. It was so hard. But
man, that's so conflicted.
So conflicted, because it really feels like the snatches of life that I enjoyed were when I took a break from thinking about the JW stuff.
Yes.
The little moments of happiness. And then I would feel guilty because, they say peace and security, and then the end will come. And that was always a conflict to me too. I'm like, why wouldn't we want peace and security on this earth? I mean, wouldn't that? Let's say, if you're a religious person, God creates us and wants us to be peaceful individuals. Okay, and He's wiped us all out because we weren't before. We actually gain that peace. We become His original plan, but because we're not sucking up to Him in a specific way, we don't deserve that peace that we originally created for. There's a lot of crap. So
yeah, it doesn't make much sense, does it?
It doesn't make sense, because it is no sense. It isn't sense. But it was a fear of ever enjoying myself. Yes. Would mean this could be the moment. The second you enjoy yourself and you're doing something that's not JW related, that's when you're going to get caught up, and that's when you're going to see the fire raining from the sky and all all that stuff. I mean, I can't even watch silly comedy movies with apocalyptic scenes because of that stuff. I mean, Revelation book did a number on a lot of us.
Oh yeah, that stuff can be very triggering to people.
Oh, those are not bedtime stories for 5-year-olds. I can still see some of those pictures in my head.
I was talking with somebody the other day, and they said that their kid, that they were, as a family, they were watching a sunset, and one of his sons, I think, also has a still-in Jada mom that he spends time with. So, he goes between the two families. But when he was with his dad, he was watching this sunset, and, the sky was like this fiery red color. And he was kind of tripping a little bit, he was scared. Yeah. He thought that maybe it was like, is this Armageddon? Because of these,
as much as loud planes, loud helicopters, any loud noises, it's still ingrained. And that to me just proves the strength of the brainwashing, because even though I know I'm a grown adult woman, this was a terrible, scary story told to me repeatedly through life, but it's still just a story. But still, those things, it's a constant process to shake them off. Like, no, come on.
Yeah,
It's not
and really,
there's no Babadook, just
right. Well, one of the reasons though is that it's so impactful is because you're so sincere as a kid. You're sweet and innocent and trying your hardest. You believe in your parents, and you believe in these things that they're telling you. So it's such an awful robbing of the innocence of the youth to pump their heads so full of this garbage that they will hold on to the rest of their lives.
I mean, socially, it's created both problems and aided me in a weird way, because socially, I still have some difficulties in dealing with just things I've never considered before, but on the outside, I've spent so much time observing people because I was not able to interact that I can figure people out really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
As a JW kid, and you're raised to believe that you're in this class of people that is trying to live a certain way and do things a certain way and bring other people over, you spend your life just observing people. If you're not living a double life, you're on the outside looking in. And so if you choose, like I did, I was like, I want to learn and try to understand people so that I can preach to them. But I didn't realize at the time I was learning how to figure people out. And it really, really helps. It helps me now, I think, in dealing with people. I can definitely sense someone's sincerity quickly, if they're interested in what I'm talking about or not. But at the same time, I'm not going to say I don't still suffer from depression, that there's not days where I just don't want to deal with people at all.
Yeah.
My husband has been amazing. And he actually, funny story about him, he's one of the fellows that I met all those years ago when I was playing chess at the coffee shop.
Oh, really? Wow. That's pretty cool how it all comes back around like that.
We've been friends for 18 years. And
wow.
we lost touch, and we ended up meeting up again when I was 32. I started playing roller hockey.
Oh, cool.
Well, short segment is I was dating a fella who played hockey, and he's like, hey, just come and try it. And I never skate. I wasn't good at skating or even staying up on my feet. I'm like, well, okay, I'll go. So I started playing hockey. I got really into it. Started joining leagues. I played for 3 years. He and I actually played against each other. We reconnected, and then we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary this December.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Cheers. And I on one of our XJW groups on Facebook, on Facebook alone, they're doing this like then and now pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So one group, I'd actually talked to my husband about this. Like, we should do like a pictures like when we were in and then pictures now. And somebody actually did that. So I posted on there, and I made sure to include the quote that right now I have everything that they said that I couldn't have. And that's just a fact. And I just got lucky, and I feel like I must have done something right somewhere along the way. My husband is a cosmic gift from the universe. I feel like everything that I have been through, I've been rewarded with having this person in my life who cares about me, cares about what I want, wants me to be successful in whatever I do. And it's unconditional love, which is a love that, aside from my cat, I didn't know about. Growing up in JWs, the love is conditional. You know that. And it's one of the most unhealthy things that they use. Love is conditional as a JW. Any child that's been shunned by their parent knows that.
Yes.
And so when you meet people who say, hey, flaws and all, I'll love you. If you love me, flaws and all, that is a beautiful thing. And that's what I have with him. I have amazing friends. I sing in a band. I always wanted to sing.
When I go places,
music? It's mostly cover songs right now, but I'm hoping to maybe break into the industry. I have some friends. I've been singing my whole life, and I'm trying to break into maybe doing a bit of country, but I sing pop, punk, rock. I mean, whatever. 90s alternative is my bread and butter, but I went to karaoke last night, did some Pearl Jam, and
nice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I grew up on too. I love the 90s alternative. Yeah. So.
Oh, awesome. I love the 90s, love the 80s, 70s, 60s, all of it. But it's just, I get to do everything and have everything that they said I couldn't.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre. I mean, the sad thing that I do not have is a relationship with my mother and my aunts and cousins and stuff. And I see, they've got their profiles online with the jw.org idolatry marker. And it's just, it's funny because I remember growing up and the watchtower symbol was the thing,
right.
That was, and it even that to me kind of, even as a child, I'm like, it's a bit golden calfage, don't you think? Don't you?
Yes, it is. It was, absolutely. Yeah.
And then now there's to this jw.org blue thing, and they're going full steam golden calf. I mean, they've got bags and clothes, and it's just so funny growing up and seeing how this cult has evolved from the 80s, seeing how, I would say, like, 70% of the stuff that they used to call out other religions for, they're all doing now.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, I mean, the cartoon shows, they got a Roku channel, all that stuff they used to talk so much crap about. There was the evangelicals who need to do that. Our word is God's word, so we don't need to use all these other facets and yada, yada. I think it's just because they couldn't understand the technology at the time. But
oh, yeah, they were just behind. That's all it was.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Yeah, once they realized they could indoctrinate people further by using these same methods, they just studied best practices, and that's what they're doing. It's just a business, and they're doing
it is a business.
Yeah, they're just marketing better. But
that's the thing. It's how did I break it down? It's a religion posing as a publishing company, posing as a cult. Or no, religion posing as a cult, posing as a publishing company.
So what was it that? So you talked about how you were POMI for a while, physically out, mentally in. What was it that actually woke you up mentally in the journey? What were the things that started to wake you to the realities that what? Not only have I seen these behaviors and stuff, but the actual doctrine is garbage too. Like, what helped you to see that?
Can I tell you? It was, you might laugh at me though, when they changed the Kingdom melodies.
Really?
When they changed the Kingdom melodies.
What was it about that?
Those songs were holy songs. Those songs, and you got to remember, I sang, so they were everything.
No, that makes total sense. This is cool. What was it that got you about that?
They started changing how some of the lyrics were and what they meant. And, my mother's trying to justify and explain it to me. And I read the new words and they didn't make sense because some of them would kind of backtrack on what other things said. And they just sounded more happy clappy. They didn't seem like the heartfelt songs that we were taught. It felt like something was changing. I felt a shift. Because the same time that they changed the Kingdom Hall songs was the exact same time when people started having personalized Bibles and book bags coming out. And I started seeing this marketing going on in the organization.
Yep.
And just all these little things, they were bothering me because I know what we're taught. Jesus threw the money sellers out the temple. Why are we having people coming in here getting personalized Bibles and bags with the logos and stuff on it and pens and like, it's funny. The things that bothered me are, I think, really weird. Just them changing the songs. My brother was telling me I was being too rigid, but I said, something about that. It just didn't sit right.
No, I totally get it because the new songs are way more like, they're more emotional and almost poppy. And
the happy clappy.
Yeah, they're not meant... They're not so much conveying a point from a scripture as they are trying to make you feel some type of way.
That's it.
And it's manipulative.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, it's way more manipulative.
All the Kingdom songs, they all had a scripture at the top that they referenced
right.
that you could draw from. And I mean, whether or not you believed in it, I think that created a connection for us. And once they changed it to, like you said, this pop style, that it was just empty.
It's
And
absolutely fascinating that is what that triggered it for you, and it makes total sense because the music is was such a big deal to you. You're
yes,
musically inclined, and wow, I think that is really fascinating. I would have
I think
never
it's
thought
kind of
that.
wacky.
What's that?
I said I think it's kind of wacky. I mean,
Oh,
there's
I
so
think
many
it's
things to
beautiful
pick
because
from.
it's so personal. I love that. I love that. That's so personal. That's you. That's Georgia. You know that it got you. That's a really interesting way of seeing it. Um, I am bothered by it just because, with the videos and the music production that they have now, and the way they are tugging at emotions and heartstrings and such. I just see it as I don't know, maybe it's going to be a little bit harder for some people to get out because I think they're getting better at their manipulation.
They
But
are. They definitely are. Because I will say, almost 9 years ago, I was able to talk to my mom briefly before she went back to England. And then now, I mean, she's completely doubled down. I can't get a hold. I don't know her number,
yeah,
her address. I sent her, when I was young, there was a beautiful photograph of her and her sister. And I have a friend in LA who's an artist. And she did the painting for me. My mom always wanted this blown up into an actual painting done by hand. My friend did it. I paid her. I shipped it to London to my brother. And this all happened very recently, so it's still raw. She made sure that he opened it up to make sure there was no apostate material or whatever inside
oh
before
God,
she would accept it. Now, this is my mother.
yeah,
This is somebody who I was trying to explain to her why I got disfellowship, Mom. Like, you need to look at this. And I mean, she's all in. I mean, she told me about situations where she had a disagreement with an elder and the elder lied, but she was still going to keep her faith. I mean, she would tell me about these things as a child, and I'm like, wait a minute.
yes, no, it's very true. Just last night, I was talking with my wife about my own mother and how before we left, we sat down one day and we were having this discussion about. I don't know. I just really started venting, and my mom was like, "Well, of course it's not all true, and of course you kind of have to pick and choose." And I was like, "Wait a minute, what? Who said you could pick and choose? Like you never let me pick and choose. Why do you get to pick and choose? And if you knew parts of this were crap all along, why were you so rigid?" And they're hypocrites. They're complete hypocrites.
And also I had my friend growing up. I think she wouldn't mind if I said her name. Her name's Tasia. She lives in, I think, Ohio now. And when she was growing up as a JW, she was, doing double life. She had a boyfriend. She actually got pregnant when we were young, when we were in. And they disfellowshipped her because not only was she going to stay at JW and have the baby, but they said, well, are you still going to have contact with the father of the child? And she said, look, we're not together anymore, but if we have a child together, I'm still going to need to talk to this man. Mm-hmm. And they disfellowshipped her. Okay. She, even though she was disfellowshipped and I was still that friend who I still loved her. That wasn't going to change a thing for me. I still broke the rules and called her to check on her. I would still try to encourage her to come back because at the time I thought I was doing the right thing.
Right.
But it was still just happy to keep that connection. And now that we're both out and we're, got our own families and we're able to talk and have our lives, it's lovely to see that. I'm glad that I never lost that contact with my friend, even though, they kicked her out and she says that too. She's like, the fact that you loved me despite what they said proves that you love me. So
that's a beautiful thing. So what would you, so you're fully out now. You've got, great friends, a husband, you've got all the things that they told you could never have. Do you?
And waking up was not easy.
Oh no, it sucks. It's very hard. I wanted to ask you a couple things. First of all, now you had kind of alluded earlier to the fact that you were from the North Fremont congregation. You mentioned, Jonathan Kendrick. Uh,
Hmm.
for those, for some, that's not going to ring a bell at all. For others, they're going to realize that was, part of the Candace Conti case, which was as far as at least my
The
exposure.
biggest lawsuit so far.
Yeah, I think was it really the first, or was it just notorious because it was so much money?
I think it might have been the money. I mean, they've had cases over the years. I mean, we know that have been covered up and settled out of court.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's
I think
true.
because of the amount and because Fremont, California, I mean, it's a sleepy town here. You don't get too much out this way.
Gotcha.
And to have something that huge happen right under our noses, yeah, it rocked the community. I mean, that's the Kingdom Hall I grew up with. It's just around the corner from where I live now.
Yeah.
So,
And so you knew Candace, and did you all grow up together, or?
Well, like I said, I wasn't really close to a lot of people in our hall. I mean, I knew her.
Yeah.
I knew that my brother and her didn't get along. But we were kids and we were all kind of butt heads back then. If I'm being honest.
Sure.
I know she came to our house at least once and played over. We had a pool, but yeah, I didn't know her specifically. Like, we weren't like buddies. Right. I knew Jonathan Kendrick used to creep me out.
Sounds like for good reason.
And also, in relating, I told when I had a conversation with my brother, this was a little while back, about Candace, and his complaint was, she was always, angry, and I'm like, do you realize with these things happening to the child, and she couldn't tell anybody, you would not have been dealing with things too well either.
Yeah, it's called acting out. Yeah, it happens all the time. It's a natural response to such horrific abuse.
And I mean, you are really in a situation where there is no one that you can tell, because, my friend who, I've had friends who their fathers have touched them or whatever, in witnesses or not, but they go to tell their mothers, or go to tell someone. If the guy's a witness, the kid's out of luck. Right. If he's not a witness, there's not really much they can do out there either, because they're not going to intervene. So it's a really precarious situation. I'm so nervous when I see little kids with these badges on, because it's just like, oh, please, somebody protect them, because this organization is not going to.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. So how did it, I was just going to ask, how did, I don't know where you were in your journey when all that came out, but I was just going to ask, kind of where you were and how it felt to watch all of that from wherever you were at the time.
Well, you mean like waking up from, or watching the Candace trials?
Yeah, when the whole Candace Conti thing was going down, I don't know where you were in your life at the time of coming out, but how did it feel, watching something like that develop in the congregation that meant so much to you growing up?
It was, I mean, the hardest part for me was, because I believe Candace, absolutely. I never saw it happen, but I know how these congregations work. I know these people, and I don't have a doubt in my mind. And she doesn't have a reason to lie about this. It's just just the thing. With these certain brothers, watching the videos and watching these elders that I'd known since I was a little child defend a pedophile, it broke my heart. Yeah, it broke my heart, because they should be the people you could go to in that situation to defend you and try to be there for you. And ultimately, they decide if you're going to be able to see your family and friends again, based off their own personal feelings. So it has nothing to do with God. It's their own personal feelings. And so to see them on the video defending him, it really hurt. I remember, I think that's when my mother decided to completely cut off contact with me, because we had been chatting a little bit up until that point. And she'd even apologized for a few things in my childhood. We'd been chatting. And then I sent her a link to the video of Kendrick's trial, and ever since that moment, she's completely been dead air for me.
Isn't it amazing? So you sent her actual factual evidence, thing she could watch with her own two eyes, and that's the end.
Well, I mean, if I sent her the link to my own video, my own YouTube, she wouldn't, the blinders are on, the brain is washed. And so with my mother, as much as I love her, it's, you either have to mourn someone that's still alive, or I kind of have to think that my mom passed away a long time ago, because she's old, she's getting to the point where she's elderly. If she was to wake up from this now, I think it would kill her. I think it would kill her, all the things that she'd given up, and all the decisions she'd made. So it's kind of, it's bittersweet, wanting to have a relationship with my mother and wanting her to be out of the truth, but also knowing that in this time of her life, her realizing what she'd done and all these things could really end her life. Because when I was 35 and woke up, it nearly killed me. And I woke up out of a dead sleep. It was it was a full waking up.
Right.
Things sort of, they started making sense in my brain. And I woke up with a full panic attack. My then boyfriend, oh my God, that poor fella. I was just like, oh my goodness. And I was like, I need to just sit down and just think about things. And I wrote down some notes, and things started making sense and lining up. And it was just like, I've been freaking lied to, you know?
Yeah. Were there any books or videos or groups or anything in particular that impacted you?
Well, I'll tell you, once I realized and things started making sense that basically everything I had been taught was a lie, I just said, okay, you got to go for this, because you need to find out why you're feeling this way. So I went on YouTube and I just typed in apostate. Okay. I just typed in apostate. And what came up was, it was a group. It was like a, kind of like this. It was a group interview. I think there was a bunch of different people. One of them was, I think, a fella named Zeb.
Oh yeah.
There was, what's his name? Neil, Great Apostate Neil. And what's that couple's name? They do Critical Thought.
JT and Lady C.
JT and Lady C. Yes. And there was another fella, Gilbert. So I was watching this, and I was kind of like listening to their different experiences, and I felt that I really felt Neil, because he had like a comedic approach to dealing with everything, and I found out he had his own channel. So I started watching all of his videos, and I actually put them in a box mark therapy, because his videos were helping me to deal with what I was feeling in a comedic way. It wasn't all doom and gloom. And Lady C and JT, let me tell you, I contacted them and they called me. They took time out of their day. And I said, look, I feel like I'm just waking up from the JWs. I'm confused. I'm scared. I'm lost. I don't know who to talk to right now. Could you just give me 5 minutes? And they sat on the phone with me, and they were so kind. Neil, I contacted him as well. He Skypes with me. This was a process, I think, between 35 to 36. And I was just, and I only contacted these people once, had one conversation with each of them, but going on YouTube, watching all the videos, hearing people's other stories, I felt so not alone. And that's basically, when you get disfellowship, that's what they want you to feel: completely alone, completely abandoned. And if you don't have, quote unquote, worldly friends, you will be. You absolutely will be. So I'm so glad that I had those college friends and so on, that I had to be there for me, because I would have probably gone back from just sheer loneliness, which is what they're hoping for, that mental manipulation. And so, you know, it was, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, it's just great that these people made themselves available to help you when you were so vulnerable.
Oh, yes.
And needed that help. So
I'm so blessed. I have some amazing friends and people in my life. I really, really do. But I've also made an effort to be around good people. Not saying they've got to be religious or whatever, because they certainly don't. If you're a good person, you're a good person, and we can hang. But and there's also a weeding out process. There's some people who have been not so great and they've had to go. But my life has been really, I mean, there's ups and downs, obviously, but I think I've benefited from being able to see, look, okay, this person's not on the same keel. They got to go, but good people. And I've always had good, supportive, strong, loving friends. So I'm very, very blessed.
So what dreams do you have for your new life? Anything that you're really looking forward to in this next chapter?
Well, my husband and I are looking to start a family. We want to have kids of our own.
Cool.
We're getting up there, you know, both hitting 40 pretty soon. If it doesn't happen naturally, we can adopt. But I definitely have a strong desire to raise a child in a loving environment where they never have to wonder or think about unconditional love, they will always feel it. They will always know it. My husband was raised Christian religious, but he's not religious either. Neither of us are what I would say religious people. When I deal with religion now, I look to understand people's faiths. So even though like, for example, my in-laws are not Christian, but if they feel sad or what have you, I use their beliefs to make them feel better. The same way if someone was Jewish or someone was Muslim, I would use whatever they believe in, because while I'm not a huge fan of religion, I'm a fan of anything that's positive. So if you can draw the positive out of it, cool. But if you're using it to oppress others, then we can't talk anymore.
Right.
So that's how I deal with people in one-on-one. Is nobody's a group, everybody's an individual. And so with the JWs, I have no hatred for any JWs. I feel sad for the brainwashed people. I feel sad for the families. And so all I can do is control my own arena. I want to raise a family that knows love, that knows understanding, that understands other religions. Maybe don't take part, but understand them and understand why certain people feel the need to hold on to them. Because I think more than anything, people need to be understood. You don't always have to play on their team, but if they feel understood, you can interact with them. And that's what both my husband and I want to encourage in our child. My husband is incredibly loving. I've got great in-laws, it's happening. So I get to sing on stage a lot, I get to perform. When I go to see live bands, a lot of the artists, they know me, so they bring me up on stage to sing. I get like videos and stuff. I mean, I'm living the dream that I never thought possible, but always hoped for. And that's, to me, is when I see these young JWs, they're going in the groups and they're like, okay, I'm getting kicked out of my house. You got to grab hold of this life because it's yours. It's not anybody else's. And you're going to get out of it what you put into it. Believe me, I would work 3, 4, sometimes 5 jobs at a time because I didn't have a safety net. If I didn't work, I didn't eat. And then when I had a cat too, I was responsible for her. So there's a lot of kids now, they're just like, oh, I can't do it. I'm depressed. I did this through suffering depression, going through hospitals, surviving rape. Bottom line, I had to take care of me. If I was going to have some sort of existence, I would have to make it happen. So I made the friends who were supportive. I made the jobs that would allow me to do what I wanted to do. And all of it's led me to a position where I feel like now I can maybe help others, encourage them. Just because things are bad now, it doesn't always have to be that way. And to understand that listening to that voice inside you is the most important thing, because most of my depression was me trying to fight it. Most of my depression was me trying to fight the reason that was trying to come to the surface, because I wanted to believe in something that, I wanted to hold on to a belief system.
No, I totally, that is so fascinating that you mentioned that, because I feel that a lot of the depression in the world is caused by people living inauthentically.
Absolutely. It is. It absolutely. I mean, growing up, my family calls me by my second name. I actually have 2 middle names. But now I go by my first name, and I have since high school, because for me, my second name is a life that I lived full of trauma. Even in the old congregation, they know me by my middle name and everything. And I have a completely different existence now. And I feel like I'm actually living my real life. I'm being who I was supposed to be. I mean, I do feel that if I was able to have a full college education and do certain things, I'd definitely be more political. Before my mom got wrapped up with the JWs, her and my father were very, very political. And I still remember 2 years old. My mom was cool. She was into politics. She got me into Star Trek and Star Wars and comic books. I mean, that was who she was. She was a big old nerd. And then that's who I am now. My husband and I, we're houses full of Star Wars stuff. But when she got the church, when she became a JW, it just all went away, and that's all she was. I mean, my memories of my mother, her sitting at the table studying her books every day. I mean, that's all she did. And if she wasn't she was in her room studying her books. It wasn't spending family time together, talking, and it was study.
What a contrast. You've got your mom who, and honestly, I think I could say the same for my mom, and I think my wife would say the same for her mom. All of our moms seem to have been pretty cool people, who had a life
Before,
of but who had a life of their own. They started studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, and it all went away.
yeah.
And then in contrast, here you are living this miserable, awful JW existence, and now you have the life. Now you're the cool person who could maybe, who hopefully gets to be the cool mom. I hope you get to
That's
be that
that's
cool mom.
we're kind of the cool adults to our friends' kids so far. So
Hey,
hopefully our child will see us that way.
well, I hope it works out for you. I wish you the best on that front. And I'm so happy that you've gotten to find you've been able to find the life, to have the things that they
I
said
had
you
to go
couldn't.
through some stuff. I had to go through some
Sure.
stuff, and I honestly believe that I couldn't appreciate a lot of what I have now if I didn't go through some stuff. Not saying that
Right.
it was necessary, but like I said, my husband is the payoff, I think, for everything that I've gone through, and he's such a good person. And I mean, my life is happy, it's peaceful, it's loving, it's again all the things they said that I couldn't possibly have. So aside from not having a relationship with my mom, I've got a great mom-in-law. She's always in my life. We get along fantastically. We're very alike. It's great.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end it. I really appreciate getting to know you. Um, I hope that you get all the wonderful and beautiful things that you want in this new, this next chapter of your life. That you can overcome the past. It seems like you pretty well have, and that you just make life what you want. That's what we're all going for.
Yeah,
Um,
we're all a work in progress. Just keep working at it, and just realize your situation now is not going to be your situation forever. Whatever you're in,
yep,
things fluctuate, but it depends on what you put into it.
absolutely. I want to thank Georgia for reaching out with her story. I think we can all agree that her rising up from the ashes of so much abuse is an inspiration, and I know that I personally had a good time getting to talk to her. She's really risen above her circumstances. If you'd like to send a message of support to Georgia, you can do so by going to shunnedpodcast.com, where you can leave a comment for her. You can also find the resources that were mentioned in the episode here and the video for the song that she chose to represent her journey. Georgia chose the song World of Stone by Blackmore's Night to represent her story. It's a Celtic female battle song. It was kind of cool. While you're at shunnedpodcast.com, you can also send me an email. You can send me a voicemail that I can use on the show by using the tab on the right of each page. You can even support the show by picking up a t-shirt or a hoodie on the store on the site. Now that that's not the only place that you can comment on the episode or get involved, we also have a Facebook group called Shunned Podcast, where we have people discussing episodes, their own lives, and we try to do some fun things on there to build community. We try to be upbuilding and supportive. I also announce things in there before anywhere else. In fact, I have a voicemail from the website from someone in the group, in the Facebook group, to share on this episode. So I'll go ahead and play that. I think it's the first time anybody's left a message just um, on their own volition. I had someone, Nico, who left a message earlier on telling a story, but Craig gave us a message, and I'd like to share that with you here.
Hey Mike, it's Craig from the UK here. Firstly, thanks for doing the show, and thanks to all the contributors. I think it's great what you do and really helps people. A topic I was thinking about was how much we immerse ourselves in looking at the religion after we leave and becoming angry and frustrated about what is going on in it. I think I know from personal experience that I can look at the forums, I can look at Twitter, I can feel quite upset and angry about what people are going through in the religion. And my point is that I don't think that it does us a great deal of good. I think we have to go through the process of feeling those things as an ex-JW, but I just wanted to really commend the group and the contributors to the group on Facebook and the way in which you guys support each other. People are able to come on, say a bit about themselves, sometimes be angry, be frustrated, and others can come on and offer their support. We don't have to be fixers. we can just hear the person, empathise with them, and I think that's a much more constructive use of our time as XGWs to really support people. It's constructive for the person, and it's constructive for us.
Thanks, Craig, for chiming in and for sharing your accent. I love that accent. I'm sure there are people out there that think I have an accent, but they're wrong because I can't hear it. Anyway, thanks for the kind comment about the Facebook group and how supportive they are to one another. That's the type of community that I wanted to build from the beginning. I don't want it to get lost in the next awful thing that the cult did, but like you said, it can have a negative impact on us if we get too lost in that. So supporting each other by sometimes just giving a listening ear, or not necessarily always having to fix a person or trying to fix their problems, but just being there and hearing a person out is a very valuable thing, and that's what we try to do in the group. You can also find the podcast on YouTube under the channel called Shunned Podcast, on Instagram at Shunned Podcast, and on Twitter at Shunned Podcast. And in all those cases, it's Shunned Podcast is just one word. If you'd like to hear my story or more insights into how the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses works, you can do so at my original podcast called This JW Life, which is also found at thisjwlife.com. I want to take the time to thank everybody who helps me make this show possible by supporting it financially. It really does mean a lot to me that people want to support what I do and that are willing to take their time and money to actually help those things, be able to come true. The show does have costs, and it takes one more thing off my plate to not have to worry about just paying the bills. So I really do appreciate your efforts, and you can support what I do here for as little as $1 a month, and it really means a lot to me to know that people are in this with me. Just go to patreon.com. That's Patreon. So patreon.com/shunned if you're interested in supporting in that way. Another way that you can support the show is to leave it a good review on iTunes. Both the Shunned Podcast and This JW Life can always use more 5-star reviews. Occasionally we get some, I'm sure it's just a disgruntled Jehovah's Witness who leaves a 1-star review. Of course, they never actually say anything. They just hit the 1-star because that's what they are. But anyway, if you like the show, a 5-star review always helps, and it helps offset those other things that people do as well. In all, it's not just about that or about the actual star rating, but getting more positive reviews helps other people to find the show, because then it moves up in the rankings in the searches on iTunes and other podcast platforms. So, it's all about sharing the love, helping other people to find the podcast so that they can get the help that they need. In the next episode, it's going to be the story of Yolanda. This is a pseudonym for someone. Yolanda faced a lot of physical abuse in her journey as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly at the hands of her own mom, who used the doctrine to get at her and to bully her. She also faced some sexual abuse, and once again, the congregation failed to do what was right by another victim. So we're going to close the episode out today with the song No Hell Yet by Farrah Voyeur. You can find a link to her song, to the Patreon page for the show, to all the resources that were mentioned and more, not just on the website, but if you're listening on a podcast app, you can probably get it all in the app by looking at the description. And as we end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God